I'm sorry, the name of the director,
Bong
Bon
Joon-ho.
Bon
Bong,
Bong
Bong,
Bong Joon Bong
Joon,
Bong Joon
Bong
Hong
Joon-ho.
Jun Bong Joon Hong Ho Hong
Ho.
Ho Bong Joon Ho Bong Joon Ho
Mm.
Bong. I wish I could see it, then I could.
Okay.
I don't want to lay all this on Bong Joon Ho's lap. Let me read.
You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
So, James, I went to see Mickey 17 yesterday for the first time, and I'm going to come right out and say I didn't like this movie that much. What
Okay.
what about you? Where are you at on Mickey 17?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I'm a huge Bong Joon-ho fan, of course,
Yeah.
and I didn't out and out love it. There are a lot of things in there that I really did like. You know, a lot of themes that he's been wrestling with on a number of his movies. He's now made 8 films, and you can claim that 4 of them are full-on sci-fi movies. I think this is the first film he's made that's 100% in English. But you've got Snowpiercer and you've got Okja, which are predominantly in English at least, and both of those count as science fiction films as well as The Host, which is his big
Mhm.
sort of monster water movie. Is like his ode to Jaws, and he clearly has like a massive love of science fiction and
Mhm.
dystopian and all of these themes. You know, there are environmental messages, ecological messages, and all that. I did come out of the movie, however, feeling that it was less than the sum of its parts. That all there were a lot of things in it that I liked. I love the design of it. I like the performances of it, and a lot of the themes that it brings up are incredibly, important and sort of well handled. But as you sit and try and digest the finished product, it did feel somewhat overlong, somewhat tonally inconsistent,
Mhm.
and kind of ends on a bit of a kind of eh,
Yeah.
rather than, and so by the time you
Yeah.
get to the end, I think it opens really, really strongly, but by the time you get to the end, you're just kind of like, oh, it's the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I am keen. I really wanted to do it before we did this, but I just haven't had time. I wanted to go watch it again because now that the that element of sort of surprise, if you like, is gone, you
Right.
can really knuckle down and sort of focus on what the film is as opposed to what it isn't, and see if I get anything more out of it. But yeah, it's a mixed bag for sure.
I suffer from. I read a movie article recently analyzing film today and was saying, where's the subtlety gone? That we everything is full on the nose. Like no, there's no way of just giving some metaphor or allegory in a subtle way, which you're trying to project maybe bigger themes as films are capable of doing. We've gotten too literal. This is this, this is this, and there's a one-to-one correlation in many ways. And I couldn't help but watch this film through the lens of having just read that article because I'm thinking, okay, you got the Trump character, and it's just such a broad. I felt it was just so broad stroked, two-dimensional. Okay, we're going to have this loud, why would anybody vote for this guy in a million years? Kind of partner with the religious right or the religious organization, and we're gonna basically everything was too. I hate the term on the nose because it gets used all
Mm.
the time, but this film was just too on the nose, and I thought some of the nuances that could have been explored that we're actually seeing in the world today, because there's a very real reason why so many people, not only in America, but across the world, are going in a certain direction politically. And to just kind of caricaturize these characters as buffoons and why would anybody follow these lards is one of the reasons we're in the situation we're in. And I don't want to lay all this on Bong Joon-ho's, you know, plate. He's not responsible for but I thought I would have liked to seen something, if you're going to explore these themes, make them more three-dimensional and not two-dimensional.
Yeah, it feels like he's trying to do too much, and there's a number of different stories that he's hoping to tackle, a number of different themes that he wants to broach, but he doesn't quite give himself enough space to really take all of them to their sort of logical conclusion. And so some of them
Mhm.
end up just being sort of a moment or a statement rather than any kind of sort of evolved narrative, if that makes sense. So you end up with these sort of larger than life caricatured characters,
Mm.
which he clearly has a fondness for, because you look at sort of Tilda Swinton's characters in both Snowpiercer and Okja,
Mhm.
and Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Okja. They are kind of cartoonish and boorish almost. I mean, here Robert Pattinson is just as over the top, and sort of ungrounded as
Mm.
Mark Ruffalo's sort of politician.
Yeah.
Where it almost feels like a comic book adaptation or something. Because the visuals are so strong, the aesthetics are so strong, and the characters are so larger than life that it kind of is reminiscent of that to some degree, but. I think occasionally, yeah, it does come at the detriment to the narrative, because his films like Snowpiercer and Octra, and I think it's not unfair to compare this film to those two films. They share a lot of similarities. Is that in both those cases they really have one central sort of idea or central theme that they then run with. In the
Right.
case of Snowpiercer, quite literally, it's a train after the end of the world kind of thing. Whereas here, I think, yeah, there are too many different ideas and different concepts sort of battling for our attention,
Mhm.
that by the end some of it feels kind of unsatisfying because it's unresolved to
Right.
a satisfying degree, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can understand from an actor's perspective why, like a Robert Pattinson or a Mark Ruffalo would want to play these larger than life characters. In the case of Pattinson, but really playing against type. This is a guy who's played the suave, is it the vampire series? I forgot the
Twilight.
Twilight series. And then obviously he was in Tenet, which I loved him in. He played Batman. So for him as an actor to play against type and play the simple-minded Mickey 17, I can see him wanting to do that to exercise some acting muscles. But I felt from a storytelling perspective, Bong Joon-ho's decision to make him simple-minded, because apparently from the source material, he's not as simple-minded in the novel. He chose to make it. There we go. Got the book.
I
He
have got
he
the book.
chose to make him more simple-minded, and I felt that that didn't really work because Robert Pattinson, what he brings is he. I find it hard to believe Robert Pattinson as a simple-minded guy, and I didn't have fun watching him act this way. It got a little better later when it was Mickey 18, but even Mickey 18 was still this hyper absurdist character. It wasn't any more grounded. It was just absurd on the other end of the spectrum. And so, by and large, I couldn't identify with any characters in this. And maybe the fault's with me, because in any film that I really enjoy, there needs to be some on-ramp of my identification with a character. And there's no character in this film that represents me in it.
I think that is fair to say that, yeah, there is no character to represent him, because Mickey, be it 17 or 18, he's such an odd
Yeah.
character that you can kind of empathize with his plight to
Mhm.
some degree, but at the same time, you're not really. I do find it kind of difficult to really get on board with him and sympathize with him and go with him,
Yes.
because he is sort of a simpleton, and that's kind of ironic to some degree, because one of the key defining characteristics of him and his clones is that they do carry across his mind, and his
Hmm.
memories and whatever. So there is that kind of cohesion, but some of the way that the character is portrayed is almost like he's starting afresh every time
Yeah.
mentally.
Yeah.
So that he is a bit sort of slow and dim-witted. And I think the explanation for that is that no one in their right mind would have signed up to be this,
Yeah.
to be an expendable. Even if they are in as desperate circumstances as he is, where he's sort of in debt and being chased by loan sharks, and it's his only way out is to sign up for this. But it would take sort of a dullard, essentially, an idiot, to agree to become an expendable and to put yourself through this situation. So I agree with that, but I don't think that necessarily is sort of the problem with the film.
Mhm.
I think. I mean, I quite admire what Robert Pattinson has done in his post Twilight career. You know,
Well, yeah,
he's
I
made all the
agree.
money and
Yeah.
he's received got all the fame that he needs, and he's like, right, I'm now in this very unique position where I can do whatever I want and work with whomever I want. And he's been quite vocal about this, and he says, well, I'm going to identify the exciting filmmakers and I'm going to work with them. You know, the project specifically is kind of secondary to be like, okay, I'm going to collaborate with this
Yeah.
person. And so, sure, that ranges from big things like, yes, he's obviously worked with Nolan on Tenet and he's worked with Matt Reeves on Batman. But he's also done sort of really interesting indie movies like Good Time with the Safdie brothers or High
Hmm.
Life with, I want to say Claire Denis. Is it Claire? Who directed High Life? I can't remember what her name is. Um, he's worked with Cronenberg in Cosmopolis, and so the opportunity to work with someone like Bong Joon-ho really fits into that sort
Hmm.
of idea, and the fact that he's willing to subvert his star image, you know, his handsome romantic lead image, and do something so, dare I say, unlikable and unrelatable as this. I kind of respect that. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of move. It's like good for you. You know, I was
Mhm.
talking, I think, with Phil on the radio just yesterday, even about sort of Hugh Grant and who was the other actor we were talking about. It'll come to me in a minute, but and how they have reached this certain point in their career where they
Mhm.
no longer need, or they're not even getting Jude Law, I think it was. Um, they're not being offered those romantic leading men roles
Yeah.
anymore, and so they are to some degree being forced to take more character based work, but at the same time it's an opportunity for them to take a big swing and experiment with something, and something a little bit weirder and a little bit more off kilter. I mean, so many times you hear actors going, oh, it's so much more fun to kind of play the villain as opposed to playing the hero, because the heroes are boring. They have to
Mhm.
be a kind of vessel upon which the audience is going to project themselves, so they can't be all that
Right.
um character, you know, they can't be all that sort of defined, because they need to be a kind of avatar for the audience to some degree, whereas the bad guys particularly can be larger than life, because they're the ones that have to really sort of grate you know, against the
Yeah,
audience.
and I agree with all that. I just find in Mickey 17 though, because everyone is kind of absurdist. There's no grounded character. Everybody makes outlandish statements, acts in outlandish ways. There's certain things that Bong Joon-ho wants to highlight.
Mm,
Um, and he's chosen this vehicle to do it. I just find that it doesn't connect with me because it's so untethered to reality that again those nuances of oh this could be something. I mean obviously I see where we're at as a society, and he's highlighting these elevated areas of narcissism and lack of empathy, and I get that, but because it is so obvious, it's not like you think, oh, that was clever. Oh, that's a subtle, that's a really cool way of highlighting that. It's
mm.
like, no, everything is just very, it is what it is. And I just found myself getting bored with it. And I mean, but there's some funny parts. I did want to highlight, like even the whole idea of him being printed and him getting stuck occasionally, and it's like retracts. It's just you felt like he's being in a printer. I
Yeah.
thought even small areas there was moments where I did laugh out loud because I thought, oh, that's good. I like that. But they were too far and few between in this film for me to find any real enjoyment.
Interesting. I mean, because I'm kind of sort of mixed on it, you know, and there's definitely a lot of stuff in there that I really sort of responded to, maybe not related to, but responded to, and that I really want to sort of champion and celebrate. You know, I think that the overall design of it looked really great. I think he's somehow
Yeah.
managed to carry over a kind of lingering aesthetic in his science fiction movies. So they all kind of look like they could exist in the same universe.
he's got a thing for snow for sure.
Definitely, he's got a thing for snow and for just sort of these industrialized interiors. You know, if you look at the train in Snowpiercer,
Yeah.
as in particular, and that's cool. You know, he's got a clear sort of authorial stamp on it, and he's clearly sort of really interested in sort of the environment and in
Yeah.
humanity's role in it, and whether humanity has a lasting role in it, or whether we're actually part of the problem, and we should get
Well,
out of the way.
that's the thing is like the girl who assumes the leadership at the end of this. She's not a particularly good character either. I think the problem is there is no nobility that actually shines through in the end. So you're
Mm.
wanting to highlight these excesses and this cancer that's in our society that has to be rooted out. But then what comes in to replace it is probably just as bad as what's gone out. You know, and for me, that's I'm left with, oh, there's no hope for humanity here.
Yeah, there is a sort of somewhat nihilistic
Yeah.
worldview at the end of the day, and that even if we leave the planet and go somewhere else, we're going to just destroy it and try and wipe out the indigenous population. It's like when he calls the creepers, he refers to them as aliens, and it's like, no, hang on,
Yeah,
that someone has to sort of
you're
remind.
the
It's like,
alien.
yeah, it's like, no, that's us, and it's just that kind of mentality. So I liked all of that stuff. I like the ambition. I mean, too often these days, people complain that so many big expensive movies that Hollywood is putting out are just so generic. They're so
Yeah.
samey. They're so sort of interchangeable. Well, this is not that for sure. This is a big swing. I like to use that expression a lot. This is, clearly a filmmaker being allowed to make the movie that they want to and to be able to tell the story that they want. And it's got a very specific authorial stamp on it. This looks like his other movies. This sounds like his other movies. The performances even feel aligned with his other movies. I think if you took his name off it, I'd be able to identify it as one of his. And I think that is inherently a good thing.
Does
And
that make
should
him an auteur?
I think definitely. I think
Yeah.
absolutely. He clearly sort of has certain artistic flourishes and ideas and sensibilities that carry across. He has a signature that is there on his work, and I think that's as good a definition of an auteur as any. That said, it doesn't all work. It doesn't all come together as satisfyingly as it might. And we have seen in previous films of his, particularly Parasite and Memories of Murder and films like that, that he has in him definitely the ability to craft an incredibly well constructed, paced, and articulated narrative that is wholly satisfying and thrilling and all the rest of it. And Mickey 17, I think, doesn't work as well in that regard.
Mhm.
And that is a shame. But I don't think at the end of the day it's really going to hold him back. I think he'll be just fine, and I wouldn't be at all. I mean, already I think the opinion on this is very divided. I think there are
Yeah.
people, you can see people, and it feels like they're falling over themselves to praise this movie
Mhm.
unjustly. Conversely, I think there are people who have dismissed this film outright as, oh, it doesn't work, it doesn't make sense, it's garbage. And I don't think either of those things are true. I think as of right now, my opinion is squarely in the middle, that some of it
Mhm.
works, some of it doesn't, and that's fine. We
Yeah.
live in a polarizing society where even in cinema reviews, movie reviews, it has to be thumbs up or thumbs down. It has to be a,
Yeah.
a masterpiece or it's a piece of shit. And
Yeah.
none of that is true. It's, most films sit somewhere in the middle and have good elements and bad elements, and this is one of those, and that's absolutely fine. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if time is kind to this film, and that when
Interesting.
given the opportunity to sort of rewatch it, revisit it, digest it, the good will rise to the top, and the
Mhm.
bits that don't work so well will sort of fade into the background, I suspect.
Well, then what would you say would be our unit of measure for grading Mickey 17?
Well, I mean, there's Mickey's, but then there's also those
Printers,
the cre
creepers.
the creepers, yeah.
Yeah.
So either of those.
How many creepers are you going to give Mickey 17, James?
Okay. Well, I don't give halves, and so because this feels very much almost like a sort of a 3.5 sort of creeper movie to me. But I don't give half, so it puts me in a situation. It's like, do I give it 3 or do I give it 4? I
I know
think
you're not going to give it a 4, so you're going to fall back on a 3, aren't you?
so. As of right now, having seen it once, I did come away somewhat dissatisfied, somewhat disappointed, despite there being a lot in there that I did enjoy, particularly the performances and the design of it and the ideas of it. As I said, I feel ultimately it's less than the sum of its parts, but I'm very eager to go back and rewatch it. And I probably make the effort to go back and rewatch it while it's still in the cinema because it does have a very strong visual sensibility and I want to make the most of
Yeah.
that. But as of right now, I'm going to give it 3.
Um, as has happened in the past, the conversation has modified my original score coming in. I was going to give this 1.5 stars.
Oof.
I
Okay.
really didn't care that much for this. And it's not like an anti Bong Joon-ho feel like, oh, you didn't make Parasite, screw this movie. Wasn't that. I was more of, I just, for all the reasons I gave, a lot of two-dimensional characters that I thought lacked nuance. I thought things could have been a little more subtle, a little more witty and clever rather than so obvious at times. But you have convinced me there are some redeeming qualities in this film. And I have to admit, the second half of the film I enjoyed more than the first, and which is interesting because normally films tend to lose it in
Hmm.
the final act for
Yeah,
me.
I think I
Whereas
enjoyed
this
the first half more than the second half. So,
this I actually got a little like I thought, okay, oh, okay. So I'm gonna leave it with 2 creepers. I'm gonna give it 2 creepers. I would kind of wish you'd gone to 4, so there was a little more of a divergence
mm.
of our opinions on this, but it's not to be. But I'll give 2 to Mickey. Well, that's what James and I think about Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, but what say you? We would love to hear your thoughts, to start a conversation in the comment box below. James?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, please do let us know, where do you stand on it? Because it has been incredibly divisive. And I'm sort of squarely in the middle at the moment. But the sad truth is I was a little bit disappointed. So where are you on it? Let us know.
Yeah.
You ought to be in pictures, oh, what a hit you would be. Your